The Bowlsby Pod. There's the Big 12 North and South. There's the Bowlsby Pod with the four that came in 2022 or three. The announcement came in the fall of 21. And then, of course, there's the Four Corners. We'll do them tomorrow. The Big 12 South will revert and get back to them on Thursday. BYU leads the way, 8-0, 5-0 in the conference. They are playing very well, starting to get some recognition, although still have work to do because they don't have much room for error. They should, but they don't. And we start with the BYU and the Fighting Kalani Sitakis.
Man, they're so good, and I still just think back to all of the people we had on that were like, I don't know. I don't know what to think of this team. And they went in underdogs at UCF for a team, one team that can't win, another one that can't lose, and the one that can't lose is the underdog, and they stuck it to UCF. They did what they do every single week. I don't know when the train's going to stop, but it's been super fun to watch, and I admire every step of the way of everything they're doing, especially since you would think it right now they're not going to sneak up on anybody, but you know what? I think that they still are, because I think some people just go, well, we'll get them, and then they get there and get beat up by them, and I'm sure they'll have fun kicking it on the bye week this week.
Yeah, I mean, they've been very impressive. I think the biggest thing to me that's been surprising is just how effective Jake Retzloff has been. I just didn't anticipate him being the playmaker that he is. And his feet have kept their season alive in some ways. I mean, some critical runs and just some really heady plays and great execution on the part of Retzloff. And that offense is really churning now that they've got the running game starting up a little bit. That was partially unlocked with L.J. Martin getting healthy. But now you're starting to see them have more success in the run game. So when you've got Martin who can run, and you've got obviously your quarterback who can run as well, and then you throw in Rapati in there, and then you've got the receivers making big plays like Chase Roberts, for example, and obviously Darius Lassiter, amongst many other. I mean, they're just really talented. They're really smoking on the offensive side of the ball. I think there was some kind of like things defensively on Saturday that you kind of are curious about, or maybe didn't look the best. But for a team that rolled in as an underdog, like, they kicked UCF's ass in a lot of ways, especially early on. Now UCF, obviously was going through a lot with the quarterback position, and they're kind of a mess right now. But for a game that was expected to be close, it wasn't all that close until the end, when UCF, put up 14 points in the fourth quarter. Beyond that, this was pretty much all Cougs. So very impressed by them. This bye week, I don't know if it comes at a good time or not. I assume that it does, because you have a couple weeks to prepare for the Holy War. But I think they still have plenty that they can improve upon. I think that's kind of the message from Kalani Sitake. But, yeah, just super impressed with Retzloff. And also, I love that I don't know if you've listened to Kalani Sitake this week, but he's really big on the Holy War being more peaceful. He is a guy who's coached at Utah, who obviously coached at BYU. Kyle Whittingham went to BYU. He coaches at Utah. There's like 1,000 connections between the coaching staffs of like guys who played at one place, coached at the other, played one place, coached at both places, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of family ties with this game. And so I think it's been interesting to see Kalani in this lead up, especially this week when they're just free and not playing this week, like really hammer home how he wants this to be heated, but he wants like it to be more respectful, I guess is the best way to put it. That he wants both sides to really embrace, like, yeah, you don't like each other, but there's so many common bonds that like really celebrate. We're in the same conference now, guys. Like, we're playing regularly again, guys. Like, this is the biggest that this game has been in a while, and he's really trying to make it Not heated, but he's trying to bring a certain level of respect to the rivalry.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
At the same time, Utah fans are angry.
Oh no, I know, but it was just very interesting because that was a big part of his messaging this week was just how much he respects Utah and how much there are common bonds and how much this is a great rivalry and how much he wants it to be respectful. So, I'd imagine it's going to be plenty heated next week. But they're sitting in a great spot. They're super talented. They're far better than I expected them to be in a multitude of ways. And, your Big 12 Coach of the Year is Kalani Sitake as it stands right now. Although Matt Campbell, that'll be an interesting, if they both keep winning out, like that vote will certainly split. But
do you think Dion gets anything if they keep
Dion
winning?
might. I'm sure the Boulder guys will vote for whoever has that. But, it's hard to also go with the undefeated.
Right now it's Sitake.
But, I think he's going to be in those conversations nationally as well. And they're a really good team. They're arguably the best in the league right now, and they get 2 weeks to prepare for as neutered of a matchup with their rival as there's been in quite some time with where Utah is right now.
When Utah joined the conference, they're like licking their chops.
You are looking dead set at 9-0 and 6-0, and now how can this season possibly get better? Well, you should beat Utah in Salt Lake City. Now, it's a rivalry game. Who the heck knows? We'll talk about that more next week. But that was an impressive win in what was thought to be a tough game against UCF.
There are two receivers, Darius Lassiter, who caught that game-winning touchdown at the end of the game and weaved through traffic, and then Chase Roberts, who gave Baylor a mouthful of who he was in that overtime game in Provo. They almost have identical stats. 31 catches, 497, averaging 16 yards a catch, and both have 4 touchdowns. That's kind of nice to have those two guys. Even Cody Epps, who we interviewed one time at Big 12 Media Days, has 8 catches, but Keanu Hill has 11 catches. They have a bunch of players, but those two, you don't know how to take one or the other out because they're both basically the same receiver, even though at different traits with Lassiter and Roberts. Now, the Big 12 Bowlsby pod. Let's go to Houston because the Cougars won. They just beat Utah in the last-second field goal. And Willie Fritz and company, who a lot of people didn't know if they'd get 1 or 2 conference wins, if any. They now have a couple. They beat TCU. They beat Utah. That was not on the bingo card when the year started. And they just they're just kind of trying to get just every day, every week, just kind of get better as they look towards the end of the season.
Yeah, just keep on growing. See what you've got at quarterback with Zion Chris. See what you can do on other parts of the field where you're deficient. Build some confidence, create some hype around the program. I mean, Willie Fritz can now go to a lot of recruits and be like, look, everybody thought we were going to really suck. And I'm not going to tell you that we were out there about to win the conference, but there are some bodies in our wake. And come on to Houston. It's fun. We're turning this thing around. Let's go. I think he can do that when you've got a couple of those wins on the wall.
Well, I think it was a really good win on homecoming against Utah, and a win that certainly when the season started, you weren't expecting that. There's all the time for the buildup and stuff, but the right now is they went and they beat Utah. That's the here and now, and that's definitely a building block that will come in handy in the future, but that's something to really celebrate from this past weekend, even if it is a little bit of a hindered Utah football program. You got to, land your shots when you got the opportunity to, and they did that, and it was an ugly game as we imagined that it would be, very low-scoring game as we imagined it probably would be. You got 2 really good defenses and 2 offenses that are very much a mess at times and still trying to figure things out in some ways. But, I thought Zion Chris played okay. They clearly have a lot of work to do still offensively. There's no question about that. There is a lot to work on from an offensive standpoint, but you got a little bit in the run game. Rashawn Sanford's obviously a guy they're very excited about in terms of the future and getting to see a little bit of him, but you had Burnett as well getting involved, and so they have some guys at tailback that were able to do some good things on Saturday, but offense is still a work in progress, but that defense gives them a chance, especially in a game where you're not playing a team that has a real prolific offense. So this worked out. I mean, this is a rock fight, right? And what better type of a game for this Houston team, the way it's currently constructed, than to win a rock fight. So they did that at home. Jack Martin with the big field goal there at the end. That was all set up by the absolutely massive interception from A.J. Hawley there late in the game. And, that was a huge play that allowed them to have the opportunity to kick that field goal. And that wasn't some gimme. That was a 43-yarder with the game on the line. So to see those kind of things, to see your team just kind of get through struggles, but then to also make big plays, the pick, the field goal, that's really encouraging as far as the direction of this program goes. So I think you're very excited about that, but they definitely still have a lot to work on. You can't expect to sit there and just, score a bunch of points at the end and win games that way. It's got to be a bit more consistent, but that's the way it worked out on Saturday. And now they get K-State. So that's if there's a downside to this week, it is the fact they turned right around. And when they have won games, they've turned right around and lost. The way the schedule's gone. So that trend looks like it will likely continue this weekend at home against the Wildcats, but there's definitely some things to build on.
All right, and then you have Cincinnati, went out to Boulder, lost 34-23. Colorado just had too much. Travis Hunter had a huge game, but others did too. 34-23, they had won back-to-back games. They had won 4 of their last 5, and sitting pretty in the conference, still 3-2. In the Big 12, and now they will host West Virginia. Something's got to give, and those teams have played each other a few times.
Yeah, they, sometimes and then they've got the bye this week, actually. So
a lot of teams do, and they're one of them. Yes.
Yeah, they've got the bye this week, and get ready for West Virginia, a team that the old Big East rivalry, getting back into it. So, they're fine. Like, they're getting better. They're fine. I'm very curious to see how that game goes. Do you bounce back, from the Colorado game? Can you kick West Virginia while they're down? That's a big thing they got to work on and get ready for next week.
West Virginia, again, that is next week. And so Cincinnati, I've been impressed with them. There's another team. You didn't know where they would be. Scott Satterfield's done a nice job with the Bearcats.
There was a huge play in this game when it was 17-14 right before halftime. Cincinnati gets it across midfield, and then they go for it on 4th and 1 with about 30 seconds left, and they get stopped. Brendan Sorsby gets stopped at right around midfield, and then Colorado, with 30 seconds to go, turns it into a touchdown drive, 5 plays, 28-second drive, and they turn a 17-14 game into a 24-14 game heading into halftime just like that. That was the critical moment in this game where Cincinnati let it slip through their fingers. So that's something that obviously didn't work out, and you learn from and you try to get better at, but that really cost them. And outside of that, it was a very competitive game, and especially first half. I think there's some things to like still if you're Cincinnati, but I think there's also some things that, you definitely didn't like coming out of this game. Your receivers weren't able to do much of anything, and that's a testament to Colorado as much as anything. But you also need some better play, bigger plays, more breakout plays from your wide receiver group. You can't just be such a run-heavy team. And in this game, it cost them that their receivers weren't able to really get much mustard. That play that I just mentioned cost them as well. I thought it was interesting as far as Satterfield did comment on not only traveling the 2 time zones, but also then playing late at night. So you're playing at like 11 o'clock Cincinnati time. So that's just one of those things you wondered if it would come into play. That wasn't an excuse, but I do think that was favorable for Colorado. But like that adds to their home field advantage a bit more when you have a team traveling and also playing late at night. So
what do you think is more difficult? Going across a couple of time zones or two to play a late game, or going the opposite way if you're on the mountain or west coast and going to Orlando and playing in the morning?
I have no idea.
I think it's about the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, either you're going to be tired because you didn't get to sleep as late as you normally do, or you're going to be tired because it's your midnight and it's their 10 o'clock.
I would hate playing late. That's part of the deal.
I'd rather play like 11 a.m. East Coast and just be a little bit more tired than be sitting at because the thing we've always heard with playing BYU, the fans and the atmosphere and all of that. But the biggest complaint I've heard about playing at BYU is having to sit in your hotel room for 12 hours during the day watching 100 games go by, and you're still sitting there with like 3 hours to go before you kick off.
Yeah.
Like that's what's hard about playing at BYU. Not the hardest thing, but it's part of it that doesn't get factored in.
Yeah, boredom gets to you.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just there, antsy. Now, the good news for these guys is they're all kids, but still, you're human beings. And you would think, I mean, listen to professional football players talk about, we've got, back-to-back trips to here, or, if the Jets, play the 49ers and Seahawks in back-to-back weeks on the road, quite often they'll just stay where they are and practice somewhere else.
Yep.
The Raiders used to do it all the time. We're like, all right, well, we've got to play Carolina and then Tampa. Well, we're just going to go stay in Tampa and, practice at so-and-so high school and call it a day.
Yeah. So that was just something that I thought was interesting that he mentioned. But they had to be better in the passing game. They weren't. They had to be better against the pass. They weren't. Colorado was just a better team, and that fourth down gamble really ended up hurting them. And what was otherwise a pretty competitive
Wasn't
game.
that touchdown, like you said, late in the half? They threw a touchdown to Travis Hunter, like with no seconds time left in the half. That was a dagger. All right, UCF.
Ugh. Ted Roof gone. They've got Arizona this week, who's also been struggling. They're favored at home. Better get a win.
They've lost 5 in a row. Oklahoma State, of course, is 0-5.
They were 3-0.
5-0.
Yeah, they're 3-0, and they're 0-5 now.
That loss to Colorado sent them into a tailspin.
This is the last buffer loss that they have, right? Like, they only have one more buffer loss. So if it's this week or it's next week, they can't lose another one after that.
Is this a football mulligan?
Yeah, I mean, it's the last one before you can be in a bowl game. I think wholesale changes are coming to UCF's coaching staff. We've already seen it with Ted Roof, but in the offseason, man, it's gonna be a weed out, I think. So they got to get this dub against Arizona in the worst way.
Yeah, I mean, they have not been good, and we talked about the West Virginia changes earlier. I think in the case of Gus Malzahn that, he's got to do something, and it's obviously not going to be putting his own head on the chopping block, but I do wonder about the heat level there. It just seems like a lot of UCF fans are fed up, and this is not what they were expecting, and that's just every fan base, but it's one thing when you're struggling. It's another thing when you're just like not even an enjoyable brand of football. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's some of this as well. But yeah, they're in a bad spot. They have to win 1 out of their or 3 out of their last 4, which doesn't seem like it's probably all that realistic. You got Arizona, you got at ASU, at West Virginia, and then Utah to close. So it's not impossible, but still it's going to be difficult to do that in a league where it's hard to really string a lot of things together unless you're BYU and ISU at this point. But I think the big story this week is obviously the staff changes. They got to figure out who their freaking quarterback is. I mean, who is the quarterback moving forward? What is the status of KJ Jefferson? Like, do we see him again, or is it all the back? His previous backups now going to be the guys moving forward, and it's Curry Brown and then Risk, who came in and looked pretty good to the point of fans going, "Where the hell has he been?" And why was he not the main guy to step up originally? Because he can actually throw the ball a little bit, although it was a small sample size. But their quarterback position is definitely something to watch moving forward. And, Gus said that it was part of the changes of him at least giving up the play calling duties was that the plate is so filled now for head coaches. And it's like, yeah, we heard that in the offseason from a lot of people. It's not something you typically have like light bulb moment 10 weeks into the year. So take that however you want to, but clearly he either got elbowed in the ribs or just realized, like, we got to do something to shake this up because this ain't working. Like, we're losing 5 games in a row. We're losing games that are big-time hyped-up games at home. Like, they're not – the bounce house is nothing right now. Mm-hmm. Like, the bounce house, it's like Rice Eccles. Like, going there normally like, oh, damn, we got to go play at Utah. It's like, okay, we'll go play at Utah. Oh, man, we got to play at the bounce. Okay, we'll go play at the bounce house. Like, we go win that game.
Down. Those fan bases are beat down, especially
Morgantown, same way.
Yeah.
I think they got to get healthy in the secondary. And Kobe Hudson, we don't know the extent of his injury. If he's hurt, that's obviously a big deal. But, yeah, I'm curious to see what they do at quarterback and if any of these coaching changes make all that much of a difference.
Man, oh, God almighty, can you just tell where we were back in July in Las Vegas? We're talking about the Big 12 and some teams that have been so much better and some that have just, like, fallen on their face, and it's happened like that year after year. Inside of the Big 12, it can happen.
I think they'll beat Arizona, but that's like Houston, Utah last week, where it's like, I mean, who wants to win this football game? That's basically Arizona versus UCF because they both need it in the worst way.
I did notice Fafita and McMillan had big stats games in the loss that they had this past weekend. So I don't know if that means they're about to maybe get on a run. You don't know. I don't know who you can trust right now within the conference. Maybe the ones at the top, yes, but that's still not going to be easy.
They're going to get theirs.
I'm sorry. Who?
What?
Arizona?
Yeah, Arizona's going to get theirs through the air this weekend against UCF. I mean, that's the matchup favors them to still do that. The matchup favors them to do that pretty much every week, but the thing now is that everybody's seen how good those two are. It's about the rest of it. And when those two aren't good, then it's especially not good. But, Arizona's had a lot of injuries. That's a game UCF should probably win at home.
That's also four corners we can talk more about them
Yeah.
tomorrow, too.